Okay, I want you to imagine this scene for a second.
All right, I'm listening.
It's a beautiful, sunny day,
Yeah.
medieval Italy. You got this big castle courtyard, flags are waving, music's playing. It's a wedding day.
Okay, nice. A happy occasion.
A very happy occasion.
Mm.
A young prince is about to marry a princess. The whole town is there celebrating. Everyone is just, filled with joy. And then, out of a perfectly clear blue sky, boom!
An earthquake? A cannonball?
A much, much stranger than that, a giant metal helmet falls out of the sky.
Wait, what? A helmet?
Yes, a helmet. But I'm not talking about a normal helmet you'd wear. This thing is the size of a car. It's made of black iron covered in these huge black feathers. It just plummets from the clouds and lands directly on the prince.
Oh, no.
And just like that, squish, the prince is gone, crushed, killed by a giant helmet from the sky.
That is, that's absolutely absurd.
It sounds like a cartoon, doesn't it? Or like a really bad comedy sketch.
It sounds completely ridiculous. I mean, how do you even...
But, and you have to believe me on this totally crazy moment is the beginning of one of the most important books in all of English history. This is the inciting incident of the very first Gothic novel.
Okay, I see where this is going now. So it sounds nuts, but it's the book that basically changed literature forever.
Exactly. Welcome to Hello English.
And we're here to help you navigate the language, the history, and some of these very strange stories.
Today, we are on a mission. We're doing a deep dive into a book called The Castle of Otranto, written by a man named Horace Walpole way, way back in 1764.
1764, wow. That is a long time ago. That's before the American Revolution.
It's ancient. But don't worry, we are not going to treat this like a boring old textbook. Our whole goal today is to tell you this story in a simple way. We want you to understand the plot without getting a headache.
And along the way, of course, we're going to pick up some really key vocabulary. We'll even try to fix a few common English mistakes that learners often make. And I think this is the most interesting part. We'll see how this old, bizarre story actually connects to our lives today, to the movies you watch and the books you're reading right now.
So whether you're on your commute, making dinner, just relaxing, let's step inside this haunted castle.
Let's do it.
Okay, so before we get back to the giant helmet, which, I still can't quite get my head around, we need to set the scene a little bit. We need some context. Because to really understand the Castle of Otranto, you kind of have to understand the man who wrote it, Horace Walpole.
Horace Walpole was a fascinating character. He wasn't just a writer. He was actually a pretty important politician, a member of Parliament in England. And get this, he was the son of the very first Prime Minister of Great Britain, Robert Walpole.
So, a rich kid, like super privileged.
Extremely, incredibly wealthy, very well connected. But he was also a little different. A bit of a rebel for his time. You have to remember, the 18th century was called the Age of Reason.
Right, the Enlightenment. All about logic, science, order. Everything had to make perfect sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Society was obsessed with logic and clarity. They wanted the world to be this, perfectly oiled machine. And then along comes Horace Walpole, who basically says, you know what? I'm bored with logic. I want mystery. I want fear. I want big emotions.
He was kind of the punk rocker of the 1700s.
In a way, yeah. He was totally going against the mainstream. In fact, he was so obsessed with the medieval past, the opposite of the Age of Reason, that he built himself a house near London called Strawberry Hill House.
Strawberry Hill House. That sounds kind of cute.
It sounds cute, but it was actually incredibly dramatic. He built it to look like a fake medieval castle. It had towers and battlements and stained glass windows and all these gloomy, dark corners. He filled it with suits of armor and old weapons.
So he lived in a theme park, basically, a personal fantasy castle.
Pretty much, yeah. He was living out his own fantasy. And one night, sleeping in this fake castle of his, he had a nightmare.
A nightmare.
A very specific one. He dreamt that he saw a gigantic hand in a suit of armor resting on the main staircase of his house.
That is genuinely terrifying. Just a hand.
Just a hand. And when he woke up, he was so struck by this image, so inspired, that he sat down and just banged out the Castle of Otranto in about 2 months. He essentially invented a whole new genre of storytelling just to explain his weird dream.
Yeah, and that genre is what we now call Gothic. Let's pause right there for our first big vocabulary word. Gothic.
Yes. This is a really important word, not just for literature, but for culture in general.
So what does Gothic actually mean when we're talking about a story?
When we talk about literature or movies, Gothic describes a style that's just full of mystery and fear. It's usually set in old, crumbling castles. There are always dark secrets and really high, intense emotions. It's the total opposite of the Age of Reason. It celebrates everything that's irrational and spooky.
So it's more of a vibe than a specific plot.
It is absolutely a vibe, yeah. Think dark, stormy nights, moonlight through a broken window, secret passageways, skeletons in the closet, people weeping in terror.
I feel like I see this everywhere today.
Oh, for sure. The whole goth subculture, the fashion with the black clothes and makeup, the dark music, it all takes its name from this literary style. Or think about modern horror movies. Any movie with a haunted house and a dark family secret, that's gothic. Tim Burton's movies are gothic.
So here's a question. Can I say I'm reading a goth novel?
Ah, that's a great question, and it's a small mistake I hear sometimes. Usually, goth with the sound refers to the person, like the teenager wearing black lipstick. When we're talking about the history or the genre of literature, we use the full adjective, gothic. So you would say, I'm reading a gothic novel.
Got it. A gothic novel.
Okay.
Not a goth novel.
Perfect.
So here's a funny little detail about the book. When Walpole first published it, he actually lied about it.
He did. He was a politician, remember? He was worried people would laugh at him for writing a ghost story. So in the introduction to the first edition, he claimed that it was just a translation of an ancient Italian manuscript he'd found, written way back in 1529.
That's the classic found footage trick, like in the movie The Blair Witch Project.
It's the exact same trick. He pretended it was real history. But the book became such a massive hit that for the second edition, he had to admit it. He was like, okay, I wrote it.
He came out of the literary closet as a fantasy writer.
He did. And that finally brings us back to the story itself. We're at the castle of Otranto. We need to meet the family.
Right. Let's introduce the cast. Who's the boss of this castle?
The head of the family is a man named Manfred. He's the Prince of Otranto. He is the guy in charge.
And is he a good guy?
Oh, no, not at all. He is a tyrant. He's controlling, he's angry, he's paranoid. He is very much the villain of our story.
Okay, Manfred, bad guy. Got it. Who's his wife?
His wife's name is Hippolyta. She's described as being very kind and very religious, but also very submissive. She just does whatever Manfred tells her to do. She's sort of the model of the dutiful wife for that time period.
And they have children.
They have two. A daughter named Matilda, who's beautiful and kind, just like her mother, and a son, Conrad.
Conrad. He's the one who's about to get married, right?
Exactly. But Conrad is described as sickly. He's weak, he's only 15 years old, and Manfred doesn't really seem to like him very much. He mostly ignores Matilda and is kind of annoyed by his weak son. But, and this is the key, Conrad is the heir.
Why does that matter so much to him?
Because of the inheritance laws back then. The title, the castle, all the power, it could only pass to a male. If Manfred dies without a son to take over, his family loses everything. So Manfred desperately needs Conrad to get married and have a son of his own immediately.
It's all about continuing the family line.
It's all about keeping power.
And who is Conrad supposed to be marrying?
He's arranged to marry Isabella. She's a princess from another powerful family, and understandably she is not very excited about marrying this sickly 15-year-old boy she's never met.
Okay, so wedding day. Everyone's gathered. But Conrad, the groom, is missing.
Manfred is storming around shouting, "Where is my son? We have to start the wedding."
And then
The helmet.
a servant comes running in, totally breathless. He can't even speak. He's so terrified, he just points out towards the courtyard. So Manfred marches out there, and that's when he sees it. This helmet, made of black iron and feathers, the size of a small house, just sitting on the ground.
And underneath it.
Underneath it is what's left of poor Conrad, crushed like an insect.
Ugh. I can't get over that image. A giant helmet falling from the sky. This is where we get to our second key vocabulary word, supernatural.
Yes, this event is the very definition of supernatural.
Let's break that word down for everyone. So super is a prefix that means above or beyond. And natural, well, that means nature, things we can explain with science and logic. So supernatural means something that is beyond our scientific understanding. It can't be explained by the laws of nature.
Like ghosts or magic.
Exactly. Ghosts, magic, vampires, and giant helmets falling out of the sky.
What about the pronunciation? I noticed some learners can struggle with the stress on that word.
That's a great point. The stress falls on the nat part. Supernatural.
Supernatural. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth pointing out a little mistake here. Sometimes learners confuse the prefix super with just meaning very good or great.
Right. In very casual slang, you might say, that movie was super. meaning it was great.
Yep.
But supernatural is a specific category. If you say, that ghost was super, it means the ghost was cool. If you say, that ghost was supernatural, you're saying it's a spirit from another dimension.
Okay, so the supernatural helmet has just killed Manfred's only son. Now, if I were a father in that situation, I'd be heartbroken, crying, devastated.
You would. Any normal person would be. But Manfred isn't sad.
He's not at all.
No, his reaction is very, very strange. He looks at the helmet, and he realizes it looks exactly like the helmet on a big marble statue in the church nearby. The statue of the old prince, Alfonso.
The old prince.
The prince who ruled Otranto before Manfred's family took over.
Ooh, okay. That's an interesting detail.
It is. But instead of grieving for his son, Manfred becomes desperate.
Desperate. This is such a useful word, but it's also one where I hear a lot of mistakes.
Me too. Let's define it first. To be desperate means you have this hopeless feeling, this urgent need to do something. You feel like time is running out. You're panicking. It's a really strong emotion.
It's that feeling you get when you have a huge final exam in 1 hour and you haven't studied at all.
That is the perfect example. You are desperate to learn everything in an hour. Or if you're lost in the desert, you're desperate for water.
Now, what's the grammar mistake I hear all the time? I often hear students say something like, I am desperate.
Yes, that is a classic one. They add an ed to the end.
I think it's because they're confusing it with other adjectives that come from verbs like excited or bored.
That's exactly why. But desperate is already an adjective. You don't need to change it. So you never say, I am desperated.
It's just, I am desperate.
He is desperate. They were desperate.
So Manfred is desperate, but why? His son is dead. Why isn't he just sad? What's he panicking about?
Because Manfred cares more about power than he does about people. And this brings us right to part 2 of our story, the prophecy and the panic.
Ooh, a prophecy. I love a good prophecy.
And you can't have a good Gothic novel without one. It's almost a rule of the genre.
So what exactly is a prophecy?
A prophecy is basically a prediction about the future, but it's usually delivered in a mysterious way, like a riddle that you have to solve. And a quick pronunciation tip, it's P-R-O-S-C.
P-R-O-S-E, got it.
Yeah.
So what's the prophecy for the castle of Otranto?
The ancient prophecy says, the castle and lordship of Otranto should pass from the present family, whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it.
Okay, let's unpack that. Whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it. Inhabit just means to live in, right?
Correct. So basically, the family will lose the castle when the real owner gets too big to fit inside the house.
That sounds impossible. How can a person grow too large for a whole castle?
Well, remember the giant helmet.
Oh, the helmet is huge. It's the size of a car.
Exactly. Manfred sees this giant helmet and his mind just goes, oh no, the prophecy. It's coming true. The real owner, maybe the ghost of Prince Alfonso, is growing into a giant. He's coming back for his castle. I'm going to lose everything.
So he's not panicking about his son. He's panicking because he thinks he's about to get an eviction notice from a ghost.
Yes. And he's just lost his son, which means he's lost his heir.
Vocabulary check. Heir. This one is super tricky for pronunciation.
It really is, and it's such a key word for any stories about royalty or rich families, even modern ones like the TV show Succession. An heir is the person who legally inherits the money, the title, or the property after someone dies.
How do we spell that?
H-E-I-R.
But wait, you didn't pronounce the H?
That's right. The H is completely silent. It sounds exactly like the word air, A-I-R, the stuff we breathe, fresh air. Manfred needs an heir.
That is such a common mistake. I hear H-air all the time.
No H, just air.
So Manfred has no heir. Conrad is gone. His wife, Hippolyta, is too old to have more children. The family line is broken. He's terrified of losing his power. So what does he do?
He comes up with a plan, a truly, truly terrible plan, a morally bankrupt, disgusting plan.
Okay, how bad are we talking?
He calls Isabella, the young woman who is supposed to marry his son, into a private room. And remember, her fiancé was just crushed to death hours ago. And he says to her, listen, Isabella, my son is dead, but I am still alive. I need an heir to save the family. So I'm going to divorce my wife, and I am going to marry you.
What? No, he can't. That's his son's fiancé. That's basically his daughter-in-law.
It is absolutely awful. It's shocking. It's designed to make the reader feel disgusted.
And what does Isabella do?
She is horrified. She screams. She says, absolutely not. But Manfred is, remember our word, desperate. He grabs her and starts chasing her around the room.
Yeah, this theme, it feels It connects to real life, doesn't it? I mean, we don't have giant helmets, but we see this kind of psychology.
We absolutely do. It's about power and control. Manfred is the perfect example of a leader who is so terrified of losing his position that he will break every rule, every moral code to hold on.
You see that in history and politics, even in the workplace.
For sure. Think about a manager who knows they've made a huge mistake. Instead of owning up to it, they might start blaming their team, or they change the rules at the last minute just to save themselves. They act irrationally because they're terrified of looking weak.
That is Manfred to a T. He's the ultimate toxic boss. He's willing to completely destroy the women in his family just to keep his title.
Perfect way to put it. He sees them as tools, not people.
So Isabella is in serious trouble. Manfred is chasing her. She manages to break away and run out of the room. This brings us to part 3, the chase and the stranger.
Right. So Isabella knows she's not safe anywhere in the main castle. She has to get out.
Where can she go?
She remembers hearing about a secret passage. She runs down into the dark underground tunnels beneath the castle.
Of course. You can't have a Gothic castle without secret underground tunnels.
It's a requirement. If you're writing a Gothic story, you need a tunnel. So it's pitch black, it's windy, a gust of wind blows out her candle. Now she's in total darkness.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It is. She's running through these dark passages. She can hear Manfred's footsteps behind her, and she is feeling completely terrified.
Let's stop at that word. Terrified.
Isabella's definitely terrified.
I notice learners sometimes get terrified and scary mixed up.
Yes. This is a classic mix-up with adjectives that end in ed versus adjectives that end in ill or in.
So if I say Isabella's scary, what am I saying?
You're saying Isabella is a monster. If something or someone is scary, they cause fear. They make other people feel afraid. A big spider is scary. A ghost is scary.
But if I'm the one feeling the fear,
then you are scared, or, for a much stronger feeling, terrified. You are the receiver of the emotion.
So to put it all together, Isabella is terrified because Manfred is scary.
Exactly. And terrified is much stronger than scared. You're scared of a mouse. You're terrified if a bear is chasing you.
Okay, so Isabella is terrified, running in the dark, and she thinks she's about to be caught. And then she sees someone.
Yes. In the darkness, she literally bumps into a young man. He's dressed like a peasant, a poor guy from the village. His name is Theodore.
Theodore. Is he a bad guy?
No, he's the opposite. In Gothic novels, you often have this character type, the noble peasant. He might look poor, but he speaks very politely and acts with incredible bravery. He sees this crying woman, and his first instinct is to say, "How can I help you?"
A real hero.
He is. He helps her find a secret trapdoor that leads out of the tunnels and into the safety of a nearby church. He saves her.
But what happens to him? To Theodore?
Just as Isabella escapes, Manfred arrives. He's missed her, but he catches Theodore.
Oh, no.
And Manfred is furious. He drags Theodore out into the main courtyard. He points at that giant helmet. It's still just sitting there. And he says, "You helped her escape. I'm going to execute you right here under this helmet."
This guy really has a thing for that helmet.
It's his favorite prop. So Theodore is about to be killed. He kneels down. He takes off his shirt to prepare for the executioner's sword.
What a tense moment.
And just as the sword is about to come down, a priest comes running out. It's his Friar Jerome, the priest from the church.
The one where the statue of the old prince is.
The very one. Friar Jerome looks at Theodore, who's now shirtless, and he sees a birthmark on Theodore's shoulder. It's a very distinct shape, a bloody arrow.
A birthmark shaped like a bloody arrow. That's very specific.
And Friar Jerome just screams, "Stop! That is my son!"
What? The priest is his dad. But priests aren't supposed to have children.
Ah, plot twist. It turns out, years ago, Friar Jerome was actually a nobleman. But after a tragedy where he thought he lost his whole family, he gave up his old life and became a priest out of grief. He thought his son died long ago, but fate brought them back together.
Fate. Let's pause on that word.
Fate, or destiny, it's this idea that there's a higher power that controls what happens in the future. It wasn't just a random accident that Theodore was in that tunnel. In this kind of story, it was fated to happen.
Okay, so this is a major reveal. The birthmark reveals Theodore's true identity.
Yes, and let's be careful with that word pair, reveal and review.
Right, I hear those mixed up a lot.
To reveal, stress on the second syllable, means to show something that was hidden. You pull back a curtain to reveal a surprise. The birthmark revealed his identity.
And review?
To review, review, also stress on the second syllable, means to look at something again. You review your notes before a test. You write a movie review.
So, Taking off the shirt reveals the birthmark. And right now, we're reviewing the vocabulary so you don't forget it.
Exactly. Excellent distinction.
Okay, this plot is getting complicated. Manfred wants to kill Theodore, but now he knows Theodore is the son of the local priest. Does he stop?
Manfred is a master manipulator. He sees a new opportunity. He says to the priest, Jerome, okay, I won't kill your son, but here's the deal. You have to help me get a divorce from my wife so I can marry Isabella. If you don't help me, I kill your son.
He's blackmailing a priest? This guy has no limits.
None whatsoever. But just as they're arguing about this, they hear trumpets.
Trumpets. More visitors. This castle is getting crowded.
Yes. A whole group of knights has arrived at the gates,
Yeah.
and they are carrying a gigantic sword.
You're kidding me. First a giant helmet falls from the sky, and now there's a giant sword.
Yes. The sword is so huge and heavy, it takes 100 men to carry it. The knights are led by a mysterious figure whose face is hidden.
Who is it?
It is revealed to be Frederick.
Frederick who?
Frederick, the Marquis of Vicenza, who is actually Isabella's father. He was thought to be dead, lost in the Holy Wars, but he had a vision, a prophecy, that told him to go to Otranto to find this giant sword.
Wow. So now we have Manfred, his wife, his daughter Matilda, the peasant who's not a peasant Theodore, the priest, Isabella hiding in a convent, and now her long-lost dad shows up with a giant sword.
It's a very full house. And this brings us to part 4, the knights, the ghost, and the climax.
Things get really complicated from here, don't they?
Very messy. We get this really bizarre love triangle, or actually it's more of a love square.
Okay, break it down for us.
Right, so here's the situation. Manfred still wants to marry Isabella so he can have an heir.
Okay, number 1.
But Isabella, of course, does not want to marry Manfred. She's now fallen in love with Theodore, the brave peasant who saved her.
Right, what about Manfred's daughter Matilda?
Well, Matilda has also fallen in love with Theodore. She met him when he was in the prison cell, and they had the secret romantic conversation.
Oh, wow. So both young women love the same hero.
And it gets weirder. Isabella's dad, Frederick, arrives, and Manfred tries to make a deal with him. Manfred says, hey, Frederick, if you let me marry your daughter Isabella, I'll let you marry my daughter Matilda.
The dads are trying to trade their daughters.
Exactly. It's treating women like property. And Frederick actually considers it for a minute because Matilda is very beautiful.
That is just so gross.
It's peak Gothic. It's all about corrupt families and forbidden desires. But while all these shady deals are being negotiated, the castle itself starts, well, acting up. It's haunted.
Haunted. Let's hit that word.
Haunted just means that a place is visited by ghosts or spirits.
And the pronunciation.
Haunted, not haunted. You want a nice open ah sound.
Haunted. So what's happening in this haunted castle?
Oh, all sorts of things. The giant sword starts vibrating by itself. The portrait of Manfred's grandfather literally climbs out of its picture frame and walks down the hall, pointing at Manfred.
A walking picture. That sounds exactly like Harry Potter.
It is. J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter movies got the idea of moving portraits directly from the Gothic tradition, which started right here with the Castle of Otranto.
So the castle itself is trying to warn them, stop this madness.
Yes. Frederick, Isabella's dad, even sees the ghost of a skeleton that warns him not to marry Matilda. So he gets scared and he backs out of the deal.
But I'm guessing Manfred doesn't back out.
No. Manfred gets drunk and angry, and then a servant comes to him with a rumor. The servant says, I saw a man and a woman meeting secretly in the church.
And Manfred immediately assumes it's Isabella and Theodore.
Immediately. He doesn't ask questions. He thinks Isabella is betraying him with Theodore. He flies into a blind rage, grabs a knife, and runs towards the dark church.
Oh no. This feels like it's going to end very, very badly.
He bursts into the church. It's dark. He sees the shadow of a woman. He doesn't call out her name. He doesn't try to see who it is. He just lunges forward and stabs her.
He kills Isabella.
No. As the woman falls to the ground, into a patch of moonlight, he realizes it isn't Isabella.
Who is it?
It's his own daughter, Matilda.
Oh, that's just tragic. He killed his own child by mistake.
Yes. The one person in the entire story who was completely innocent and kind. He killed her because he was acting purely on anger and paranoia.
There is such a huge real-life lesson there, making decisions under pressure.
This is the modern connection right here. Manfred didn't check the facts. He didn't communicate. He just acted on pure, raw emotion.
There's an English idiom that's perfect for this. Look before you leap.
He absolutely leaped without looking, and in doing so, he destroyed the one good thing he had left in his life.
So Matilda is dead.
Yeah.
That is so sad. How does this all end? This has to be our final section, part 5.
Yeah.
resolution, and legacy.
With Matilda dead in his arms, Manfred finally breaks. He realizes what a monster he's become, and at that exact moment, the prophecy is fulfilled.
The real owner, too large for the house part.
Yes. Suddenly, the castle walls start to shake and crack. There's a crash of thunder. A gigantic ghost, the form of the original Prince Alfonso, rises up out of the castle ruins. He is so huge that he breaks the castle apart just by standing up. And then he ascends into heaven.
The castle is destroyed. The very symbol of Manfred's power is just gone.
Completely gone. And as he disappears, the ghost points down at Theodore and says, "Behold the true Prince of Otranto."
Wait, Theodore? The peasant boy is the true prince.
It turns out, yes, Theodore is actually the grandson of the original prince, Alfonso. His father, Friar Jerome, had secretly married Alfonso's daughter years ago, so Theodore has royal blood.
So Theodore was noble all along.
That is our final vocabulary word, noble.
And noble has two meanings here, doesn't it?
It does. The first meaning is about rank in society, being a king, or a prince, or a duke. Theodore is noble by blood. He's a true prince.
And the second meaning?
The second meaning is about character. To be noble means to be honest and brave and good. And Theodore acted noble even when everyone thought he was a poor peasant.
I really like that. It speaks to the theme of identity. You know, people are so quick to judge others by their clothes or their job. But this story says that true nobility, true character, comes from the inside.
Exactly. Manfred was a prince by title, but he acted like a monster. Theodore was a peasant by appearance, but he always acted like a prince.
Before we wrap up the story, can we just do one final check on the pronunciation of the word castle, since the book is called The Castle of Otranto?
Yes, absolutely. Just like the word heir, this word has a silent letter.
It's not pronounced castle with a hard T sound.
No, the T is totally silent. It's just C-A-S-L.
Like the words listen or whistle.
Perfect. C-S-L.
So the castle is destroyed. Manfred finally confesses all his crimes. He and his wife Hippolyta decide to give up their worldly lives and join separate monasteries to repent for their sins.
And what about Theodore? Theodore becomes the new rightful Prince of Otranto, and he marries Isabella.
So it's a happy ending after all.
Well, kind of. It's a very Gothic ending. Yes, they get married and he becomes the prince. But the book makes a point of saying they aren't exactly happy ever after. They are both still deeply sad about Matilda's tragic death.
So it's a bittersweet ending.
Very bittersweet. It acknowledges that trauma doesn't just disappear when you get what you want.
Wow, what a story. Giant helmets, secret tunnels, birthmarks, bleeding statues, walking portraits, and accidental murder.
It really does have everything, doesn't it?
So let's wrap this up. Why does this matter? Why should our listeners today care about this silly, over-the-top story from 1764?
Well, you have to remember, before this book, novels were mostly realistic. They were about normal people doing normal things. And Horace Walpole looked at all that and basically said, this is boring.
He wanted to feel something bigger.
He wanted fear. He wanted suspense. He proved that people like being scared in a safe context. It's a feeling called the sublime, that feeling of awe and terror you get when you're faced with something huge and powerful.
It's the roller coaster effect, the
Yeah.
thrill of it all.
Exactly. And honestly, without The Castle of Otranto, we might not have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We probably wouldn't have Dracula. We almost certainly wouldn't have Stephen King.
Or even Harry Potter with those moving portraits we talk about. Or Scooby-Doo with the secret passages.
Or Twilight. The whole idea of a dark, brooding, dangerous romance really gets its start here.
And you also mentioned Shakespeare earlier.
Right. Walpole loved Shakespeare. And in plays like Hamlet, you have serious tragedy with kings, but you also have funny scenes with common soldiers or gravediggers. Walpole copied that structure. He mixed the high and the low, the tragic and the comedic, all in the same story.
Well, I think we did it. We survived our trip to the Castle of Otranto.
And thankfully, no giant helmets fell on us in the process.
I am checking the ceiling as we speak. I think we're safe.
Good to hear.
And all of you listening, if you were able to follow that story, congratulations. You just understood the very first Gothic novel ever written. You navigated a pretty complex plot, and you've learned some really high-level vocabulary.
And please don't worry if you missed a few words here and there. The goal is always to get the main idea. You can always go back and listen again.
And try to use the words we learned today. Tell a friend, I am desperate for a cup of coffee. Or talk about a movie and say, that was truly terrifying.
Or you could say, I think my apartment is haunted.
Maybe. Maybe don't say that one unless it's actually true.
Fair enough.
If you want to keep improving your English by listening to more amazing stories, make sure to watch the rest of the videos on this channel. We have a lot more mysteries to explore together.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep up the great work.
See you next time. Goodbye.